Okay, so if you signed up for pesticide containers, you're in the right place. Welcome, everybody. And I hope that our time together will be very fruitful. So what are we going to talk about today? Pesticide containers. What do the regulations say about pesticide containers? And more specifically, closed systems. We're going to be talking about service containers and also different aspects or different safety measures that you need to take into consideration when you're handling pesticides. Okay? And we'll always have a list of resources for you at the very end of our presentation. So we're going to start off with our first poll. I would like to know and ensure that we're all on the same page as far as this question. The pesticide label is the most important part of the container because, choose all that apply. It contains safety measures I must follow. It contains use instructions I must follow. It is a legally binding document and I must comply. So why is the pesticide label the most important part of the container? And this topic is leading into my conversation, my discussion about pesticide containers, right? We're going to share the results. Every single one of these options is accurate. It is the most important part of the container because it contains the safety measures that you must follow in order to be safe. It also contains use instructions that you must comply with because it is a legally binding document, okay? And why is that important? This is what a pesticide label can look like. It could be the sticker right on top of the container itself, but it could also be a detachable booklet that comes off. Together, that is the entire label. So we're going to hear a little bit about, well, let's continue with this. Like I said, the pesticide label is really important. It is a complex legal document. It has the safety instructions and the detailed use instructions. Every label will contain this sentence. It is a violation of federal law to use a product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. So like it says, it is a federal document. We have in the United States and California, we have the different layers of regulations that we need to adhere to. The label is the federal level that we need to adhere to, and it's established by EPA. Then we have the state regulations, which DPR is in charge of, and many counties also add an additional layer. So all of that together gives us the entire cake of regulations, okay? So in order for an individual to start handling pesticides, you have to be trained as a handler. Okay, so what does it mean to be a handler? What kinds of activities will you be performing while that are considered handling a pesticide? You can go ahead and toss a couple of answers into the chat before I reveal all the answers. So if you're a handler, what kinds of things are you doing with pesticides? Mixing and loading, applying. Yeah, you're an applicator. Filling, mixing, loading, applying, all. Yep. Okay. So, yep. Awesome. So before you mix, repair tech, very good. No one has given that one before. Equipment maintenance. Yeah. Before you're loading, before applying, before storing, and before transporting. And also, if you're working on equipment, repairing your equipment, that is also considered a job of a handler. Before you do any of those tasks, you need to be trained. And that is a code section that tells you what the requirements are. okay? Before disposing, that brings up a very good point. Yes, because if you are you're considered, if you are moving a container that has been opened, you need to have been trained as a handler. So if you're disposing of something, that container most likely has already been opened, and then disposing is also considered a task a handler would perform. And thus that individual needs to be trained. Okay, so now we move on to pesticide containers. These are the different code sections with the different topics related to containers. Section 6724B20, very specific, says warnings about taking pesticides or pesticide containers home. That does happen, and it happens way too often. And it's, in many cases, it is lethal. So that is in regulation. The next one is 6680, a proper container. What is a proper container? Well, the container in which you purchase the product, because that container is designed to hold that product, those chemicals, okay? So never put the pesticides in containers used for food, drink, or household products. And the third one is 6676. Keep the pesticides in their original containers, if at all possible, with its original label. And this is, among other reasons, the reason why we started off this conversation about why is a label so important. Because if you're going to be taking some of the product and putting it into another container, the rest of the world needs to know what's in there because it's a pesticide, okay? So let's talk a little bit about not taking the pesticides or their containers home. Maybe you have heard stories about people out in the fields and they come across a product that works really, really well, and they want to take it home because the stuff they have at home doesn't work as well. Well, they put it into, we have here this example of some apple juice container, and I'll just, pour it in there, take it home, and I'm going to make sure that I use it this weekend. In the meantime, their child may come home and they may accidentally ingest the apple juice. And it has happened, we're not making this up. There's also a story that we heard in all our years of training where an individual poured pesticide product into a Coke can, took it home, put it in his fridge, and he himself consumed it and died. So please, we can't reiterate it enough. Do not take pesticides or their containers home, okay? If you have any questions, go ahead and plop them into the chat and we will continue. The next thing I'd like to do is launch poll number 2 about closed mixing system. Let's see. Which of the following parts of the label determines if you will need to use a closed mixing system? Oh, the word system got cut off. Is it active ingredient, precautionary statement, or the signal word? Okay, thank you. Wait, I got your answer. The answer is precautionary statement. It used to be the signal word, and that has now been changed. So now you need to read the precautionary statement, and that's where you will know. It will tell you if you need to use a closed mixing system for the product you're about to mix or load or apply. So usually you would think, in order for it to be the active ingredient, you would have to know the specific active ingredient and how, I'm going to use a word that's very lethal, right? The signal word gives you an indication of how dangerous the product may be. In the precautionary statements, it describes the specific pesticide hazards related to these three areas: hazards to humans and domestic animals, environmental hazards, and physical and chemical hazards. And we are looking for the information specifically related to the hazards to humans and domestic animals. Okay, so when you are getting ready to buy a product, use the product, mix it, read the label, okay, and see what the precautionary statements say. So we are looking at close mixing systems as a sort of pesticide containers, not others. And there are three that are specifically laid out in the Pesticide Safety Information series. So those colorful banners are a reference to the pesticide series information, N3 for non-ag and A3 for ag. Okay, and they specifically indicate when you have to use a closed mixing system and what it actually means. We have a two-tier system. Okay, so you have to use a tier 1 system if you mix the pesticide and the label says fatal if absorbed through the skin or something similar. That means that if you get pesticide onto your skin, it is readily absorbed and it is fatal. Okay, so it is really important if the product you're using, the precautionary statements indicate that it is fatal if absorbed through the skin, that you are using a tier 1 closed mixing system. And that system, it removes the pesticide from the container. So there's a series of hoses and attachments, and it rinses and drains the empty container while it's still connected to the closed system. You have to make sure that it stays a closed system. It's a closed system for a reason, okay? You also have a tier 2 mixing system, and that is in case the precautionary statement says may be fatal if absorbed through the skin, or if it's corrosive or causes skin damage or something similar. Again, you have to read the label carefully, the precautionary statements in this instance, to see whether or not the product that you will be using will require a mixing system. The difference between the tiers is that tier 1, it actually rinses and drains the container while it's still attached, and tier 2 does not do that. It does not rinse the container. Okay. So the next type of The next type of pesticide container is a water-soluble packaging. Never, ever open the package. It is water-soluble, meaning you take the little packages, and here there are different types of the labeling, but also of the product. And you will take that and just put it into the water and it will dissolve. Again, it is formulated in that way, packaged that way for your protection, okay? And lastly, we have enclosed cabs. These are also considered a container because it is protecting you from the pesticides. Okay, and so it is, an enclosed cab can be a cockpit of an aircraft, a tractor or any other vehicle with windows and doors that can close. And it must protect you from touching anything outside that has pesticides on it, okay? Make sure that you do have your PPE ready to put on when you get out of the enclosed cab, okay? I highly recommend that if you find yourself in a situation where you need to use a product with a closed mixing system, that you get a hold of the PSISs and read up, because the PSIS A3 and N3 have very detailed information that can help you and ensure your safety when you're applying these types of chemicals or products, I should say. Okay. Our next topic is a service container. And before we launch, well, let's go ahead and launch poll number 3. Okay. What is the definition of a service container? Is it the container that a pesticide is sold and distributed in? The container used to store pesticides that is not the original container? Or the container that we use to mix pesticides? So 45% of you said the container that we use to mix pesticides. That is technically not the definition of the service container. The definition is a container used to store pesticides that is not the original container. So imagine, and the container used, the container that a pesticide is sold and distributed in, that is the original container, pesticide container. So we have the original pesticide container, a service container that you would use if you're going to store some of the pesticide in it. So take it from its original container and put it into a service container. And then you do have a container in which you mix pesticides. Sometimes in some cases it may be the same, but technically it's not, that's not the definition of a service container. Did you know? Well, you know, it kind of takes me back to the point at the very beginning, there was a code that said, keep your pesticide products in the original container if possible. Okay, but if you have this large drum with product and you need to put it into smaller containers for storage in different sites and warehouses or storage units, you have to put it in a smaller container. And did you know that there are requirements for labeling of that particular container? And that container is the service container. Okay, so do you know, does anybody know what are some of the requirements? What is required to appear on a service container label? Just plop it into the chat. Take a guess. We're going to be talking about this next. What is some of the information? What information do you think is required on a service container label? Okay. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to give you the answer. Some of you've got it right. Yep. So this is a code that actually spells out what a service container is and the labeling that is required on it. Okay. Your service label, your service container label, the information in red, that is required. You need the company name, so your company name if you're responsible, and your mailing address. You need the name of the pesticide, and you need the signal word, okay? We recommend, we being used as the Pesticide Safety Program, we recommend you add the EPA registration number and a cell phone number, because it's much easier to get a hold of somebody if you have their cell phone number. So that's what our recommendation. But like I said, the lettering in red, that's required, okay? So imagine having a solid, like you see in the picture here, if we were to take a similar container and we are going to put a pesticide product in there and it doesn't have a label, you get a label and you add that information, you handwrite it or print it, and then you put it on that container, okay? That's a service container label. So let's talk a little bit about the EPA registration number. Why would that be so important? Well, because that is the number that contains the very specific formulation and ingredients of that product that differ from, let's say here on the screen, we have Daconil Action, and then you also have Daconil Action XL or whatever. I'm just making this up. Okay. Each one of these products is going to have their own unique EPA registration number, and their formulations are different. Okay. I just got a question in the chat. Whose cell phone number goes on there on the label? It will be the company and mailing address of the person or a company that is responsible for this product. So it's also their cell phone number. Who is a contact person? Okay, the person responsible, that's whose number should be on the label. That's a very good question. Thank you. Where do you find the signal word? Yes, the signal word is on the original label. If you take a look at my screen, I am now circling the signal word of this product. Okay. Okay, that's the signal word. Okay. And so back to the EPA registration number. All the labels, you will find this type of information. This set of letters and numbers, and this set of letters and numbers. Of these two, which one is the registration number, the EPA registration number? I'm going to give you the answer. It's this top one. The reg number, not the EST number. Correct. The EPA registration number is the single most important piece of information for tracking the pesticide product and getting treated for pesticide exposure. And the establishment number, that's what that stands for, is a number that identifies where it was manufactured. Confusion comes in when instead of TX, this one was obviously manufactured in Texas, sometimes it says CA. And so people in California may think that that is the EPA registration number for California. It is not. You want this number, the registration number, okay? So there is a participant that indicated you use the EPA number on your pesticide use report. Correct. That EPA registration number is the most important piece of information for identifying the product and its formulation and how to treat an individual who has been exposed. Okay. Any more questions about this, about the label, what goes on there, where you find that information that goes on the label? Okay. So what else can we talk about and say about containers? It's getting fun. Opening containers. This little image kind of makes me nervous and I can't watch it too much because I'm like, oh my gosh. So this is clearly not the way you want to open a pesticide container, right? So this is more like what we would like to see, what we need to see, because this is taking into consideration many of the different safety measures to protect yourself. First of all, this individual is wearing the PPE required, right? It's a flat surface. You are using a cutting instrument, whether it's sharp scissors or a knife, to open the bag. They have to be clearly marked for pesticide use only. So don't take them home with you. Don't leave them lying around in the shop or your storage unit or your mixing and loading site. Label them for pesticide use only, wash them and store them. Okay, I want you to take a quick look here to the left of this individual. There is a scale, and that is going to be important because the next point I'm going to make is about weighing or measuring a product. Okay, we're talking about when you have a dry product, you're going to weigh it. And some of you might be saying that is very obvious. Well, we also have to keep in mind that a lot of the people that we may be working with in, especially ag, but maybe not just on, oh, one moment. We have individuals that come from other countries where they may use other units of measurement. So when we have to make sure that we're all understanding if it's fluid or fluid ounces, Are we going to weigh, or are we going to, if it's dry product or a liquid product, are you going to measure it or are you going to weigh it? Okay. It sounds very obvious, but it is worth mentioning because it is important to ensure that you are using the correct amount. Later this year, we are going to be, we will have a webinar on label reading. And in that webinar, we will be talking specifically about how to comply with the use requirements in the use requirements on the label, okay? If you go above what is on the label, you are no longer in compliance, okay? So that's why it's really important to understand when you're supposed to measure and when you're supposed to weigh a product, okay? Other safety measures, when you're going to pour a product, make sure that you are standing on a stable surface, that you are above the tank where you're going to be pouring, and do it slowly, carefully, so that you avoid splashing. It is, again, very important that you read the label directions to know how much, what the ratio is of water, how much you're going to need, and so it just prevents, number one, non-compliance with the label. Again, it is a legal document, so you want to comply. It ensures that the applicator is safe, that you do not ruin a crop, and you're protecting the environment, okay? So our next poll is poll number 4, triple rinsing. When are you required to triple rinse a pesticide container? Whenever you have the chance, at the end of every workday, or immediately after emptying the container. Okay. Go ahead and share the results. Correct. Everybody got this one correct. That's great. Immediately after emptying the container. Yep. So I have a feeling that you are all very familiar with the triple rinsing procedures. You have to rinse them immediately after emptying your container. And again, we sound like we're repeating ourselves, but it is very important. You have to follow the label, okay? And if it's a mixed closing system, in some cases, like we saw earlier today, it will do the rinsing for you. And if not, here are the steps for triple rinsing. So basically you calculate how large your container is. If it's more than 5 gallons, you'll fill it up with 1/5 water, 20% of water. And then you will rinse and shaky, shaky, shaky. And then you'll dump it back into your tank, your mixing tank, okay? If it is a container that is 5 gallons or less, you'll want to use 25% water, filling it up and then mixing it, and then pouring it into your mixing tank. And you'll want to repeat these steps at least 2 times, 2 more times, for a total of 3. Thus the triple rinsing procedure, okay? Any questions? I see everybody shaking their heads no. Okay. Okay. Poll number 5, proper disposal. Pesticide containers, when empty and triple rinse, are considered ready for disposal. True or false? True. Once they have been emptied and triple rinsed, they are considered ready for disposal, okay? The one important factor is that to keep in mind is that a pesticide container is never really, really clean, right? So now that you have used your product, you've rinsed it out, and you have these containers, we have to ensure that they don't get reused. We have to ensure that they don't make it back into somebody's home and used for another purpose, okay? So what you can do, or what you should do, is you poke a hole in the container. You've triple rinsed it, you poke a hole in the container, and then you can store them. There's a beautiful picture right there of someone who is collecting all the empty containers. And check with your local ag commissioner. Many places may have, many commissioners may have a designated date where they will collect the containers. And so you'll want to check in with them. I just got distracted because I saw this question come in. It is recommended to make a hole. Yeah, you want to poke a hole, you want to puncture the container so that it does not get reused, okay? So I was saying that you want to check with your local ag commissioner for disposal options. I'm reading the question. Okay. So I have a question here, and shouldn't they go to hazardous waste instead of regular trash to the landfill? There isn't a way that it's not required by law, or it's not illegal to go into the landfill. It depends on, like, this individual here has collected all of these containers. Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to ask my colleague, Sarah, who recently, she has the answer to this question. Sarah, are you available to answer that question? Thank you.
Yes, and I will try to answer it as best I can. So Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong. So as long as your container has been triple rinsed, it does not have to be, it is not considered hazardous waste material. So yes, it can go into the regular trash of a landfill. But I believe when Maria had a poll question where asking if it's triple rinsed, does that mean it's ready for disposal? Yes. So it can go to the landfill, but the better option of disposing of your containers is to send them to a recycler, which I believe Maria was getting at. So long story short, they are not considered hazardous waste only if they've been triple rinsed. If they have not been triple rinsed, yes, they are hazardous waste. Okay.
Does that answer your question, Henry? Sort of. Okay.
Yeah, so Henry says sort of, but if you want to, well, Henry says the ag commissioner told us we must perforate. Yeah, that's typically the best practice. I don't believe that's in the regulation, but actually I'll look. I'm going to go follow that link and I'll let you know in the chat if perforation is required by regulation. It's fine for ag commissioners to require something in addition to what the state regulation is, but I can't remember that exact detail, but that is something that we ask people to do. And usually it's just to prevent people from using that clean pesticide container.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go check on the regulation and I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, so earlier on, I see, Henry, that you also, you said my local ag commissioner likes us to puncture the container and cap. And then you said a local rule then, maybe, but it is true that it's like Lisa said, it is best practice to puncture the hole, puncture the container. And we've even heard stories, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, in our trainings where people say, oh, we're asked to like separate the caps from the actual containers. And then some people will puncture the cap if you're going to put it back on the container. So again, I think it's best practices. Maybe in some cases, it may be a ag commissioner that has made a local rule. Our go-to answer is make sure that your ag commissioner is your best friend, because they will know what the regulation is. They will tell you if there is additional local rules. And when they go to inspect you, they can tell you what they're looking for. And then you will know what you need to do or definitely not do. Okay. We have some more.
Maria, we have a question in the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
It says, what is the best practice to dispose of sacks and bags?
That was my next slide.
Okay, we will hold off then.
Okay. And then Sarah, I might have to call on you again for that. So, but I think I've got this one.
Good to hear.
And yes, Fernando just added something to this before I move on, that the regulation states that the user must establish a recycling program. If you look on the slide, it's actually the registrants. The registrants. So like the company that actually registers the product, they are required to establish and participate in a recycling program. Okay. Okay, so the next one is pesticide bags. It's very similar to the pesticide containers. If they are properly emptied, they are not considered hazardous waste. And so you can throw them away in your regular trash can. You also have the option of burning them. There are specific, I'm not sure, Sarah, help me. Is it a specific regulation or just like recommendations on burning bags?
I believe it depends on the county. So that is something you'd want to talk with your county ag commissioner about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's as far as I'm gonna go with that one.
Yeah, it is dependent on the county. Different counties have different rules because burning bags has air quality implications. And so there are definitely some county specific instructions that you need to follow for those. Exactly.
Yeah. Does that answer your question in Q&A? Are there any follow-up questions? You know, you will not get a copy of the presentation, but like Sarah mentioned at the very beginning of our introduction, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube page. So you are more than welcome to go back and review it. Okay. Yeah. So here are a couple of links to some resources that we have for you. Plus, Lisa has added links in chat throughout the presentation when I made reference to a code section, when I made reference to the Pesticide Safety Information Series. And in a week's time, everyone will get some form of verification that you've attended the webinar, and that email will contain a list. It will just have all the links that we made reference to that we sent throughout the presentation. So you will have them in one spot. Okay. So if you don't have any more questions, I thank you for participating today. Here is my contact information, and hold on.
I think let's hold and see if people have questions before we move to the quiz. Just to, because we have time. So we have time to answer questions that relate to pesticide containers. So please take this opportunity. Usually we get to the end of the webinar and it's like 1 minute. 1 minute to take the quiz and leave. So there's some Q&As. So
there's two. Oh, Elizabeth is asking if you can go back to the last slide with the links, Maria.
Oh, the resources. And I can put the resource links. I'll put some links in the chat. One of them is the UCIPM events page. And so that's where you probably went to find information about this webinar, but also at that page, you can look for, you can find online training. So if you need more continuing education and you want to, we've got some personal protective equipment, online class, it's all self-paced, but I'll dig up the resource links for these two other things in here.
There's also a question from Jim. To recycle your containers, do you take them back to your distributor where you purchased the product? We have heard of individuals, in some cases that is a possibility. But again, it is a very local thing, and the best thing to do is check with your ag commissioner, and they will give you an indication of what the possibilities are for your situation. I know that you can actually, if you buy a product and you don't like use it all up and you have to get rid of it, some distributors may take it back. So it really is a case by case situation. And yeah, like I said earlier, our go-to response is make sure that your ag commissioner is your best friend. Okay, so we have something, any regulations regarding cleanup of returnable containers, or is this strictly between the purchaser and the manufacturer or retailer? I don't recall finding any regulations regarding the cleanup, like how clean they have to be before you can take them back. Is that what you're asking, Carlos? Yeah, I don't think it's in the regulations. It's like we mentioned in the triple rinsing procedure. Once you've done triple that procedure, then it is considered clean. Basically, it's not considered hazardous waste. That's as close as I think that you'll get to something being defined as clean. And we just want to reiterate, a pesticide container is never clean. You cannot reuse it in any situation. Okay. Some distributors do have a program. I have found that you have to be buying in bulk, like 50-gram drums. I have had no success returning 2.5-gram jugs, just saying. Thank you for that information, Henry. Okay.
So I want to, I put a link in the chat to the pesticide container recycling fact sheet. It's from DPR. I mean, there's interstate ag plastics and they operate in California too. Usually they coordinate with the county. So like a county will coordinate a recycling event. And that's available to you typically free of charge. I see a comment in the chat, they have to pay for it. And that may very well be true. And that's for disposal, but recycling events are free. So just keep that in mind. But here, I don't know if I can share my screen real fast. Let's see.
I can stop.
How do you feel about that, Maria? I'll just share this one thing and I'll stop sharing. So this is a fact sheet. It's linked to in the chat, and there's requirements. What if, you know, like how to just record keeping. There's all of this, and basically, you know, it kind of depends on your county if there is a recycling event. And usually it's the ag commissioner, and we encourage you to do that, because just think of all the pesticides that you guys use in a season and all that plastic. And so if you triple rinse and do a great job and you send it to the landfill, just multiply that by however many other operations there are using pesticides regularly. Let's multiply it by 1,000. So if you use 10 containers in a year, multiply it by 1,000. I think that's 100,000 plastic containers that are just going to go to a landfill and just take up space in the landfill. So recycling just really frees up that space. And the more space we take up in the landfill with pesticide containers, the more expensive it's going to be to dispose of them. And frankly, the more expensive land's going to be. That's my opinion. I really don't know anything, but so yeah, we do encourage you guys to recycle. It's just going to be easier, free, and just better overall for our resources.
Okay, so here's my contact information, and you can also follow us on Twitter. We do send out tweets when we have upcoming events. And for those of you that do not need CE, we're done. So you're free to go.